Hello, I'm Esther Gidhu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken holds discussions in Nigeria amid concerns about security and stability in West Africa. Israeli officials say Hamas is still holding over 130 hostages as many of their families visit the United States to raise awareness over concerns about their seized loved ones. And Donald Trump wins the New Hampshire primary in a rout. What does it mean for Nikki Haley's future as the Republican race turns to her home state of South Carolina? All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken held talks Wednesday in Nigeria amid concerns about security and stability in the Sahel sub-region of West Africa. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Nigerian President Bola Tinubu on Tuesday and praised his leadership, but said it is no secret that there are challenges that need to be overcome to unlock the full potential of Africa's largest democracy.
Tackling corruption, making it easier for foreign companies to repatriate capital, these will all pull in a transformative direction and pull in transformative investment. I know that President Tinubu is focused on these challenges, and we also welcome his very bold economic reforms to unify the currency and fuel subsidies.
Blinken said he had discussed the July coup by a military junta in neighboring Niger.
We also discussed challenges to democracy and security in West Africa. We very much appreciate Nigeria's leadership in ECOWAS to try to move to a return to the constitutional order and democracy in Niger after it's been disrupted.
Blinken traveled to Nigeria from the Ivory Coast, where he met with Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara and discussed regional security challenges.
We appreciate particularly the leadership shown by Côte d'Ivoire in countering extremism and violence.
Blinken said this is his third trip to Nigeria as the top U.S. diplomat, including a virtual visit during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. One expert told VOA the Biden administration's diplomatic commitment to Africa is remarkable.
I've been working in and on Africa since 1985, and I've really never seen so much attention by the U.S. government to the continent, which I think is a great sign of U.S. engagement.
On Monday, Blinken launched the trip with a stopover in Cape Verde, a long-standing partner of the United States. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
For more on U.S. Secretary of State Blinken's visit to Africa, I'm joined live from Abuja, Nigeria by Ovigwe Egwegu, an African policy analyst at Development Reimagined. Mr. Egwegu, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Now, given the complex nature of extremism in the region, how significant is Secretary Blinken's pledge of $45 million to boost security in the coast of West Africa?
Yeah, I think it's quite remarkable the amount of attention that has been given to the continent, and that is very true for the Biden administration. As we're speaking right now, we have this major visit by Secretary Blinken, and I think it goes a long way to reinforce U.S. commitment, and not just the commitments in words, but also in action. Now, with this pledge, there are several initiatives in the West African region aimed at tackling insecurity, like the Accra Initiative, or somewhat maybe the money where we contributed to the ECOWAS. It's not particularly clear how the money will be disbursed, but it's very crucial in terms of funding, training, coordination. Maybe it could go into humanitarian action. There's so much it can do, right? So this pledge makes it very, very crucial for strengthening the partnership.
Blinken has also hailed Cape Verde as a beacon of stability in the region. What set Cape Verde apart from the other countries there, and what can they learn from Cape Verde?
I think in the last few years, we've seen the spate of coups sweeping to the West Africa region in particular. And several countries have also had attempted coups, like Sierra Leone, for instance. But we've not seen anything for some countries, like Cape Verde is a shining example. Since the 1990s, has been very stable, a democratic country. I mean, as a matter of fact, when Secretary Blinken was in Cabo Verde, he visited the port project there, and that port project, got U.S. funding of about $150 million from the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which set aside for countries with remarkable and democratic, credentials. So it shows a lot that Cape Verde is seen by the U.S. not for that stability that has maintained for that long.
And what were the main takeaways of his conversation with Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu yesterday and also today?
I think security by far is the most important. Like I did mention, we've seen these coups in recent years, and Nigeria holds the presidency of ECOWAS, has been leading, the efforts of course, with the help of countries like Cote d'Ivoire to reinstate the deposed President Bazoum, and also at least push other countries like Burkina Faso, like Mali, back towards democratic transition. So receiving the visit and receiving Secretary Blinken actually demonstrates to all these countries that the U.S. and its partners in the region will continue to work collaboratively. And I think this also featured in the conversation. Things also like about repatriating investments, because we know we have a little currency issues in the country. And also the U.S. companies in the country might be facing some of those challenges. And I think that also will be discussed as well.
Evigwe, thank you very much for your insight. Evigwe Egwegu is an Africa policy analyst at Development Reimagined. A South African man is under arrest and could face 76 counts of murder after telling an inquiry that he started a deadly building fire last year while trying to dispose of the body of someone he had strangled in the apartment complex on the orders of a drug dealer. The shocking confession came as the man was testifying during a public probe into the causes of the nighttime fire last August in Johannesburg that killed 76 people. It was one of South Africa's worst disasters. According to South African media, the 29-year-old man, whose identity has not been made public, triggered the fire that swept through the dilapidated 5-story building in the city's Marshalltown district, killing dozens, including at least 12 children. More than 80 people were injured. Police say they arrested the man following his testimony. The documentary film feature, Bobi Wine, the People's President, about Ugandan opposition figure and pop star turned politician Bobi Wine and his run in the 2021 presidential election, which he lost to veteran leader Yoweri Museveni, has been nominated for an Oscar in the 2024 documentary film feature category. VOA's Douglas Mpuga spoke to Bobi Wine.
Yeah, we are very humbled to see our Ugandan story making it to such a huge global platform. For us, it has always been our effort to highlight our plight to the international stage. It would help us to convince those that fund the regime in Uganda to reconsider, or at least to put stringent conditions, including respect for human rights and respect for democracy. There's no other way that we would raise our voice than bringing our voice to the Oscars, one of the most prestigious platforms in the world. So we hope this will have an impact and create more awareness of our struggle in Uganda.
To those who are not familiar with your documentary, The People's President, what motivated you to do this documentary, and what does it tell the world?
Well, the director heard about my story, and he thought it was interesting. So when he requested that he filmed myself, my wife, and my comrades up close, I said yes to it. For us, it was an opportunity to invite the world into our struggle for freedom in Uganda.
What do you hope to achieve from this? What do you think, what are your expectations from this documentary?
We hope to elevate our voice further, and we hope to ask the world to join our hope and our desperate cry for freedom, for human rights, and for democracy in Uganda.
Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine speaking to VOA's Douglas Mpuga. VOA's Douglas Mpuga also spoke to Henry Okello Oryem, Uganda's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who says the documentary is based on lies told to Western audiences. Oryem says, quote, Western countries are gullible to anything and anybody that talks negatively against the government of the day. In the face of challenges that include armed conflicts, food insecurity, migration, health pandemics, climate change and terrorism, leaders meeting at the Non-Aligned Movement and G77 Summit in Uganda say there is an urgent need for global partnerships in finding solutions. Mugume Davis Rwakaringi reports from Kampala.
At the conclusion of the Non-Aligned Movement NAM Summit in Kampala, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni took up the 3-year rotational leadership from Azerbaijan. The theme of this year's summit was deepening cooperation for shared global affluence. The Kampala summit took amid geopolitical challenges such as the conflict between Israel and the Hamas militants, fighting in Sudan, Mali, and insecurity in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as tensions between Somalia and Ethiopia, and Rwanda and Burundi. Speaking at the summit, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni emphasized the relevance of the NAM and the G77 plus China. Museveni said members of these blocs should aim at ensuring equal trading rights with the rest of the world.
Africa has got everything. Here we have everything. What we need from other people are markets and investments. But we shall not only sell to you, we shall also buy from you. We are not like others.
With the world's second largest population, estimated at more than 1.5 billion people, Museveni says Africa, which also has one of the youngest populations, has a lot to offer the world, both in terms of raw material and labor. Philip Kashaija, a lecturer of political science and international relations at Uganda's Makerere University, says members of NAM and the G77 plus China and African nations in particular have to start by trading amongst themselves.
We have the African Free Continental Trade Area. 54 African countries have subscribed to this thing. It's only Eritrea which has not signed and ratified. So 54 countries, and if we can walk the talk, which is we sign these agreements and we agree, let's remove internal barriers to trade, why not? Potentially we can mobilize more than $3.2 trillion. That's the equivalent of the total GDP of UK.
Sahara Birete, who heads Watchdog, the Center for Constitutional Governance in Uganda, says all member countries have to, in two courts, first put their houses in order. Birete also calls on NAM members to place a special focus on climate mitigation solutions.
Stop the human rights violations, stop the bad governance and corruption in order to give their citizens an equal opportunity for economic development, which will in turn strengthen their national economies. And they will demand respect in turn, because international law and dynamics, you must have respect to influence the international dynamics. Then from there they need to be intentional on their objectives and resolutions.
For VOA News, I am Gume Davis Rwakaringi in Kampala, Uganda.
Israel says that its forces have carried out airstrikes and ground attacks in northern, central and southern Gaza. Meanwhile, the United Nations chief warned of the heartbreaking and catastrophic effects of the war on Palestinian civilians. The Israeli military released video of its actions that included the city of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, where fighting has grown more intense in recent weeks, and Israel says that it has encircled the area. An Israeli military warning told people in parts of northern Khan Yunis to evacuate the area. The latest such order that Israel says is meant to protect civilians from the fighting. But with the war moving farther south and nearly all of the population having fled their homes, there are fewer and fewer safe places for civilians to go. The White House said Tuesday that Middle East envoy Brett McGurk was in Cairo as part of the latest efforts to secure a temporary ceasefire that would include mechanisms for releasing hostages held by Hamas in Gaza, as well as freeing Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Israeli officials say Hamas is still holding over 130 Israelis who were seized on October 7th. Families of some of those hostages are in the United States to raise awareness about an issue they fear has been fading since the collapse of a November ceasefire. VOA's Natasha Mosgovaya has our story.
Families of Israeli hostages came to this synagogue in the Pacific Northwest state of Washington to raise awareness of loved ones still being held captive by Hamas. 16-year-old Harel Sharabi traveled without her father, who is in Israel mourning his brother Yossi Sharabi, killed in captivity. She's hoping her other uncle Eli, also hostage, survives.
Our mission isn't done yet. We have to bring Eli home and Yossi's corpse home so we can have something to bury. We didn't even have a funeral because there's nothing to bury.
Ronnie Cohen's twin brother, Nimrod Cohen, was also abducted. She fears people are starting to forget about those who were taken in the October 7 attack.
People don't talk enough about the hostages. Some even forgot. I mean, it's been 3.5 months now, and for some people it's like old news, and we feel it every day, every second.
She and her father, Yehuda Cohen, say outside of Israel, hostage families have seen both hatred and support, but not enough action.
Our government is more focused on fighting, which, as we see, and after 107 days, it's not bringing us any of our beloved ones back alive.
More than 100 civilians abducted from Israel by Hamas were exchanged for Palestinian prisoners during a November ceasefire. There have been no releases since, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Sunday vowing to continue the war in Gaza until Hamas is no longer a threat.
In exchange for the release of our hostages, Hamas demands the end of the war, the withdrawal of our forces from Gaza, the release of all the murderers and rapists of Nakba, and leaving Hamas intact. If we agree to this, our warriors fell in vain.
Different hostage families lobbied U.S. lawmakers in Washington last week, hoping they might help bring more political pressure to secure their release. And for hostages who have been released, the healing has hardly begun. Some have no homes to come back to. Others await the release of those still held captive, or mourn those who were killed.
Ruti, Ohad, and Karen came back. They were released after 49 days. And our uncle, Abraham, is still in captivity.
Along with 135 others, as they approach 4 months in the hands of Hamas, their families kept in the dark about their condition. Natasha Mosgovaya, VOA News, Seattle.
Action in the Africa Cup of Nations has been hot and heavy. Joining us now to tell us more about it is VOA's Mukbil Yabaru. Hello, Mukbil.
Hey, Esther, how you doing?
Good. Now, tell us, what's the latest AFCON news you have for us?
So, this is not pertaining to the games, but coaches. So, the Ivorian coach, Jean-Louis Gasset, has been fired by the Ivorian team as they await to see if they can make it to the next round. There are some implications in the games that'll be played today to see if they're amongst the third place teams that'll make it over to the other side. And then on the other news, the Ghanaian head coach as well, Chris Hughton, has also been fired by the Ghanaian team as they have not advanced, and now they have no chance to get to the round of 16.
Mukbil, Group C and F have their final plays coming up. Who's dominating those groups?
Yeah, absolutely, Esther. As for those groups, I would say Mali and Morocco have shown that they are the two most dominant teams. But to be honest with you, it's been one of those tricky type of group stages for these two groups where South Africa has shown an excellent performance in their last match where they won 4-0 against Namibia. And then on the other side, DRC tied with Morocco 1-1. So they're also showing some strength.
Well, let's talk about the hosts there. What are the chances of Ivory Coast making it through the next round?
Yeah, some really good possibilities for them, as 4 of the 6 third place teams will make it over to the round of 16. At the moment, Ghana is completely out. So that leaves one more spot depending on how these Group E and F matchups line up today. We will know by the end of today if Ivory Coast makes it to the next level. And I'm excited for them. And I know the entire city is waiting for them to make it through.
Mukbil, always good to hear from you. Thank you so much. VOA's Mukbil Yabaru reporting live for us from Abidjan, Ivory Coast. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, abortion remains a sensitive issue to American voters. We'll be right back.
This week on Straight Talk Africa. Landlocked Ethiopia has signed a deal with Somaliland for access to the Red Sea in return for recognition of Somaliland as an independent state. Somalia has rejected the pact, characterizing it as an open interference with Somalia's sovereignty, freedom and unity. Could Ethiopia's deal with Somaliland destabilize the Horn of Africa? Join me, Heidi Adams, and my guests as we discuss this on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Despite adoption of international treaties and instruments to better protect women against gender-based violence, United Nations says almost 1 in 3 women continue to be subjected to physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence at least once in their lives. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we will discuss whether existing laws on violence against women are effective enough to criminalize forms of domestic violence in sub-Saharan Africa. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, Nigerian officials say 10 soldiers were wounded and several dozen jihadist fighters were killed during fighting in the nation's southeastern region. Niger's defense ministry says jihadists from Boko Haram group attacked a special intervention battalion positioned at the airport in the Difa region near the border with Nigeria. And South African officials are expecting the International Court of Justice on Friday to rule on whether it will grant emergency measures to stop the war in Gaza, according to News 24, a South African news website. However, Crispin Piri, the spokesperson for South Africa's Justice Ministry, says they do not have an official communication from the court as to when the judgment will be delivered. New Hampshire primary voters gave decisive wins to Donald Trump and Joe Biden in one of the first votes leading to the 2024 presidential election. VOA's Caroline Presutti reports from Nashua, New Hampshire.
Voters in New Hampshire Tuesday propelled former President Donald Trump closer to the Republican nomination. Coming off a first-place finish in the Iowa caucuses, he now has a New Hampshire win. In his victory speech, he sounded as if he had moved on to November.
We have beaten Biden. I think we called it right. Immigration's a big deal, a big deal.
His voters never wavered.
I'd lay my life down for that man.
This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go.
All right. Good morning. Good morning.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley narrowed the gap with Trump thanks to the state's independent voters, like Jessica Minasian.
Like most of us, we're just looking for another option, someone to come in and, like I said, because we've been divided and we want to bring everybody together and just be Americans.
I asked Donald Trump Jr. about those voters as he arrived to greet volunteers.
We've talked to independents in line, and they've said that they're going for Haley. What do you say to them?
They're not independents, they're Democrats.
The Democrats had their own worries. Write-in Biden signs seemed to be growing in the tiny town of Plymouth. Because of a National Democratic Party calendar change, the president's name was not on the ballot, but he still won handily.
We'll see you on the trail.
From here, all eyes move south for the next state primary.
For Trump, South Carolina represents an opportunity to show that he can defeat one of his opponents, Nikki Haley, on her own home turf.
The former South Carolina governor says she's not going to let that happen. Nikki Haley's first campaign event in South Carolina starts in less than 24 hours. Caroline Presutti, VOA News, Nashua, New Hampshire.
Vice President Kamala Harris is crisscrossing the United States to equate President Joe Biden's re-election campaign with the protection and expansion of reproductive rights. Meanwhile, Republican candidates are speaking of a possible federal abortion ban. This leaves the ultimate choice on the sensitive issue to American voters. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House.
As the American presidential race heats up, candidates are impressing on voters that abortion is a key issue. On Monday, the 51st anniversary of the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling that federally protected the right to have an abortion, Vice President Kamala Harris visited Wisconsin to highlight the Biden administration's support of full access to reproductive care, including abortion.
In America, freedom is not to be given. It is not to be bestowed. It is ours by right. By right. And that includes the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, not the government telling you what to do.
President Joe Biden, a devoted lifelong Catholic, has expressed personal reservations about abortion. On Monday, however, he described the Supreme Court's 2022 decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and throw the matter to individual states as unfair. Since that court ruling, he noted, voters in different states have repeatedly voted to uphold abortion access.
Voters have voted to protect reproductive rights. We need these protections in every state because your family to have access to health care should not depend on your zip code.
Followers of the current Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump say Trump opposes abortion, but his position has varied and is unclear. His campaign website does not address the issue. A request for comment was not immediately returned. The Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives gave his opposition a personal spin at a recent anti-abortion rally in Washington, where he said he was the product of an unplanned teen pregnancy.
We're passing these bills and we're marching today because it takes a lot of work to convince people that every single human child, every unborn child, has a value that is too profound and precious to ignore. And we have every reason to be optimistic, my friends, that we can change public opinion.
Anti-abortion activists say they're glad the Supreme Court put the decision back in states' hands. But now they must decide which national leader is going to move the issue forward. Activist Eric Scheidler, who joined the
That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.